Welcome to State of the Offense, your fantasy football source for your favorite team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Welcome to State of the Offense, your unbiased coverage of your favorite team's offense, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Last year, the Jaguars finished 9th in total offense, 10th in passing, 14th in rushing, and 10th in scoring, which earned them a 9-8 record, the AFC South title, an epic comeback playoff victory over the Chargers, and only a 7-point loss to the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. In the skill positions, the Jaguars bring back their starters from last season, except for Marvin Jones. Former Atlanta Falcon wide receiver Calvin Ridley will replace Jones in the lineup. In the draft, they added 2 new playmakers with Brenton Strange and Tank Bixby. Most fantasy football shows will only mention skill players, but at State of the Offense, we look at the entire offensive unit. We start in the trenches by analyzing the condition of the offensive line. On the offensive line, Jacksonville will bring back 6 linemen who started games from last year. With the 27th pick overall in the first round, the Jags did use their draft pick on Anton Harrison, a tackle from Oklahoma. Starting left tackle Cam Robinson will be suspended in the beginning of the season. Last year, Robinson graded at a 79, which was good enough for the 22nd best left tackle in football. Walker Little was expected to fill in for Robinson during the suspension. Little started 3 games last year and he graded at a 68, which would rank him as the 31st left tackle in the league. The Jaguars drafted Little in the 2nd round in 2021, so the organization is depending on Little to develop as a reliable starter who will live up to being the number 45 pick in a fairly recent draft. Left guard Ben Bartch suffered a knee injury in Week 5. Jags general manager Trent Baalke recently stated that Bartch may not be ready for training camp. He graded at a 69, which ranked him in the 23 to 25 range of starting left guards. Bartch is a free agent at the end of the season. Now, after Bartch was injured, Tyler Shatley took his place in the starting lineup. The current depth chart shows Shatley as the backup center. The first team center on the depth chart shows to be second-year man Luke Fortner, who played 100% of the snaps as a rookie, and he graded out at a 68, which rated him as the 28th best center in the NFL. When Shatley played, he graded at a 72 last year, and he played 71.9% of the snaps. So Shatley is versatile enough to start either at guard or center, depending on how things in camp play out. The most reliable offensive lineman on the team, Brandon Sheriff, was a major free agent signing in 2022. Sheriff was the highest graded player on the Jacksonville offensive line with an 87 grade, and he also played every game and had a 96.7% snap share. Brandon Sheriff was the 4th highest rated right guard in the game last year. He is under contract through 2024. Last year's starting right tackle, Jawan Taylor, is now with Kansas City. First round pick Anton Harrison is expected to start at right tackle at the beginning of the year. There's a possibility of some shuffling along the offensive line once Robinson and Bartch are ready to return to the lineup. The offensive line is the clear weakness of the offense. If Trevor Lawrence or Travis Etienne have a fall off in production, the lack of development by the offensive line may be a big reason for it. The Jaguars will open the season with 1 stud offensive lineman in Brandon Sheriff. Cam Robinson will be missed for the first 6 weeks. On the plus side, the Jaguars do have young offensive linemen who they have invested high draft picks into. Walker Little, Luke Fortner, and Anton Harrison are 3 guys that the Jaguars have taken since 2021 with top 65 draft picks. These guys have talent, but they have not matured yet. If they grow along a similar course with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, this offense may peak as a group together. The improvement of quarterback Trevor Lawrence from year 1 to year 2 was remarkable to watch. Here's a breakdown of how his numbers jumped from year 1 to year 2. Completion rate from 59.6% up to 66.3%. From 6 yards per attempt to 7 yards per attempt. From 12 touchdown passes to 25 touchdown passes. Interceptions dropped from 17 down to 8, and he was also sacked 5 less times. His quarterback rating jumped from a 71.9 to a 95.2. The ESPN QBR from 39.1 to 54.5. And more importantly, from the worst team in the NFL in 2021 to the second round of the playoffs in 2022. Trevor Lawrence's star is burning super hot right now. In fantasy football, Trevor was the quarterback 7 in total points scored last year, but he was 12th in average points per game. He is currently the quarterback 8 drafted at pick 74 in the 7th round. There's a 17-pick gap between Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert. Let Herbert get drafted before you pick Lawrence if you want him. I think that Lawrence is a solid pick in the 7th round, but you should also be aware that he was very inconsistent last year. You should probably get another guy in the draft like a Kirk Cousins later to supplement through tough spells. The wide receiver core in Jacksonville brings in a major talent with former Atlanta Falcons wide receiver Calvin Ridley. Ridley has been out of action since early 2021. The last full season he played in Atlanta, he caught 90 passes for 1,374 yards, and he had 9 touchdowns. If Ridley takes his comeback to the NFL seriously, the opportunity to play with an emerging quarterback like Trevor Lawrence alongside a good wide receiver in Christian Kirk will renew his career very well. Ridley is currently the wide receiver 26 drafted at the 64 spot, which places him in the 6th round. I think this is a bit risky. The group he is getting drafted with includes wide receivers DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, and Deontay Johnson. All of these guys have shown more than Ridley recently. And another thing to factor in is that as a Jaguar fan, Trevor Lawrence and Christian Kirk are still available. My question to you is it worth it to take Calvin Ridley in the 6th round with 2 seasons of no production and a gambling suspension over Trevor Lawrence? I would take Trevor Lawrence 100 times out of 100 times in that situation. The other wide receivers represent less risk and are all pretty talented guys. When considering Calvin Ridley, you also have to think about how established is Christian Kirk as the number 1 wide receiver in Jacksonville. Kirk is currently the wide receiver 32 drafted. Kirk is the 89th player drafted overall, going in the 8th round. Are you sure that Ridley will outproduce Kirk? I would probably go in a different direction than Calvin Ridley before Christian Kirk. Last year, Christian Kirk was the wide receiver 11 in total points. He was 19th in average points per game, yet he is getting taken as the wide receiver 32. Be careful not to fall victim to too much Ridley hype. Trevor may pass for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns, so both guys may produce together, but drafting is about cost awareness. If you miss in the middle of the draft, it will cost you quality starters. These 6th through 8th rounds are important. These are 3 starters in your fantasy lineup. Getting it right is the difference between who takes home the money and who doesn't. Kirk and Lawrence are safer bets than Calvin Ridley, but drafters are taking Ridley ahead of both of them. Zay Jones is the wide receiver 25 in fantasy points, and he was 33rd in average points per game as the number 2 wide receiver in Jacksonville last year. Right now, because of Ridley, he is sliding down to the 58th wide receiver drafted, and he's going in the 14th round. I think with the addition of Ridley and the decrease in Zay Jones' role, I'm not sure that Zay is even worth drafting this year. I think that it is very reasonable to think that Christian Kirk will outperform the 8th round cost, which is what we always look for as fantasy football players. Evan Ingram had a nice debut with the Jaguars. He recorded career highs in catches and yards last year. Ingram was the tight end 5 in points scored in fantasy. He was the tight end 8 in average points per game, which makes him a mid-range starter at the tight end position. He is currently the tight end 8 drafted at pick 89, which makes him an 8th rounder. I'm a fantasy player who goes for a top 3 tight end because the guys that finish in the top 3, like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, they are extremely rare. You win leagues with number 1 or number 2 tight end production more than you do if you have, say, the tight end 5. Position scarcity makes the top tight ends more valuable. I would rather get a wide receiver, running back, or quarterback in the 8th round than a tight end. Another factor that may limit Evan Ingram in fantasy is that the Jags did use a 2nd round draft pick on a tight end If Brenton Strange plays well as a rookie, he will take opportunities away from Ingram. Strange was the 61st player drafted, so the Jaguars see something in him. Rookie tight ends aren't usually worth drafting, but they can take points and opportunities away from veteran players like Ingram. Third-year running back Travis Etienne finally got back to action after a season-ending injury in the preseason of his rookie year. Etienne had a very nice season. He averaged 5.1 yards per carry, and he rushed for over 1,100 yards. At Clemson, he caught a lot of balls from Trevor Lawrence, but his receiving usage was nothing special. 35 receptions for 316 yards was somewhat of a disappointment to fantasy players. This impacted his production quite a bit. In 2022, Etienne was the running back 17 in total points scored, and he was 22nd running back in average points per game. Not bad, but here's the catch. His ADP is running back 10 at the 25th spot overall, which makes him the first pick in the third round, and he was the number 22 running back in points per game last year. That production level is risky and speculative for the 25th pick in the draft. At 25, I'm looking for a dominant player that will help me win weeks. This is your third best player. I just don't think that Etienne is the best option at pick number 25. Guys like Mark Andrews and Joe Burrow are available in this range. Another factor in the Travis Etienne situation is that the Jaguars used the 86th pick in the draft, a third rounder, on running back Tank Bigsby from Auburn. If you watch SEC football, you know that this kid can play. He's all Auburn had last year. As a Jaguar fan, you should be happy for Tank Bigsby joining the team, but as a fantasy player, you should understand that Travis Etienne may not be able to live up to the running back 10 spot in production. If you end up with Travis Etienne in your draft, getting Tank Bigsby late as a handcuff may be a good idea for injury insurance, but the problem is that if you only have 13 or 14 roster spots to fill for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, you may need a guy who produces points in your lineup more than Travis Etienne's backup as an insurance policy. Everyone is on to the Jaguars offense going into the season. The success of last year has been needed by Jaguar fans for a long time. In the past, as a fantasy football player and a Jaguars fan, you could count on getting some Jags on your team pretty easily. Now it won't be so easy. Overvaluing your favorite players usually leads to losing in fantasy football. Average draft position is where the winners find ways to win leagues. Going into this season, trusting Christian Kirk is your best bet. Trevor Lawrence needs to be drafted in the right place in order to maximize your fantasy team. The possibility of getting burned on drafting Travis Etienne, Calvin Ridley, or Evan Ingram exists. In dynasty leagues, all the young players for Jacksonville, Lawrence, Etienne, Bigsby, Strange, they are all worth grabbing if you can get them. Bigsby is going in the second round of rookie drafts right now. If you have Etienne in a dynasty or a keeper league and you have a few roster spots available, drafting Tank Bigsby is a good idea. The easiest guy to get in dynasty leagues from the Jaguars is probably Christian Kirk. If you don't have Trevor Lawrence already and you want to get him, it will cost you plenty. There are so many reasons to be happy if you are a Jaguars fan in 2023. The breakout happened. Hopefully, the positive direction of the franchise will continue, but the AFC South will start getting harder to win. The other three teams all invested in highly regarded quarterback prospects this offseason. If Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud, or Will Levis eventually turns into a franchise quarterback, then a clear advantage that the Jaguars organization has with a franchise quarterback, and they currently enjoy, may not last for long. The defense will have to get considerably better for the team to stay as the best team in the AFC South. And the growth of the young offensive line is crucial for the overall long-term success of the franchise. The Jaguars should have a reasonable chance to repeat as the division champions, but the AFC is stacked to where making the playoffs as a wild card is pretty tough. But the fact that people in North Florida and South Georgia can now talk about the Jags being good is a pretty refreshing change. If you like today's coverage of the Jaguars offense, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to support it.